Before we get into more topics, I will introduce you to this topic first. Several important economists have moved their version of Keynes' approach to economics directly into the mainstream of macroeconomic theory. Prominent among them were Alvin Hansen and Paul Samuelson. The first two sections of this chapter cover Hansen's and Samuelson's ideas. The third section looks at the idea of post-Keynesian economists who contend that the contemporary neoclassical synthesis between Keynesian microeconomics and neoclassical microeconomics, is not only seriously flawed but also incompatible with Keynes' own ideas. Finally, we discuss the ideas of contemporary neo-Keynesian economists. Alvin H. Hansen from 1887 to 1975. Now I will discuss about the contribution of Alvin H. Hansen in developing the ideas of Keynesian school. Alvin was born in Vibok, South Dakota, where he spent his early years of education in one-room schoolhouse. He attended high school at Sioux Falls Academy and then enrolled at Yankton College, where he graduated in 1910. He received his PhD from the University of Wisconsin in 1918 and from there went to teach at Brown University and the University of Minnesota. At Minnesota, he published Business Cycle Theory in 1927, a book that earned him a reputation as being one of the nation's leading macroeconomic scholars. In 1937, 1 year after Keynes' publication of the General Theory, Hansen joined the faculty at Harvard. He earlier had pointed out a mathematical error in Keynes' treatise on money, and his initial reaction to the General Theory was less than enthusiastic. But following deeper study of Keynes' system of ideas, Hansen soon changed his opinion. For several years, he and his students at Harvard made Keynes' work and its policy implication the central focus of their physical policy seminar. Several of those attending this seminar later become prominent contributors to economics and public policy. In addition to Musgrave, Hansen's students included such prominent economists as F.C. Domar, John Dunlop, Walter Salant, Paul Samuelson, Paul Sweezy, James Tobin, and Henry Wallich. In 1941, Hansen published Physical Policy and Business Cycles, which supported Keynes' analysis of the macroeconomic problem of the 1930s and endorsed active and continuous policies by government to stabilize the economy. Hansen, known for his always present green visor, often testified before congressional committees on his policy views and on Keynesian principles. Because of his strong advocacy of government intervention to promote full employment, people call him the American Keynes. But as pointed out by Paul Samuelson, Hansen's influence was international. 10 of his books were translated into one or more languages, totaling 29 translations. One of these, A Guide to Keynes, became very familiar to thousands of graduate students who use in their struggle to understand the more historic section of Keynes' The General Theory.
The Heath-Hansen synthesis. 1 year after publication of the General Theory, John Richard Heath published an important journal article, Mr. Keynes and the Classic, a suggested interpretation. Heath pointed out that Keynes' theory of the interest rate, and therefore his theory of equilibrium income, was indeterminate. In figure 21.2, Keynes viewed that the interest rate has been determined by liquidity preference, money demands MD, and the money supply MS. Once the market rate of interest is determined, then the level of investment I become known in figure 21.3. Together with consumption expenditures, investment determines aggregate expenditures and thus the level of national income and domestic input. Heath correctly note that Keynes' liquidity preference schedule its MD depends on the level of national income. At higher income levels, people desire to hold more money to buy the greatest volume of goods and services available. The level of income thus depends on the interest rate through investment, but the interest rate depends on the level of income through liquidity preference (MD). Hitch then suggested a way to resolve the indeterminacy and in so doing develop an unfixed economy model that synthesizes the Keynesian and neoclassical perspective. Today we refer to the Hitch-Hansen synthesis as ISLM model. Who is Sir John Hitch? Sir John Hitch born in 1904 at Warwick, England. He got education at Clifton College and Balliol College from 1917 until 1926. Lectured at the London School of Economy and Political Science, Cambridge from 1926 to 1938 and became professor at University of Manchester. His most familiar contribution in macroeconomics was the Hitch-Hansen ISLM model, published in his paper Mr. Keynes and the Classic Suggested Interpretations. This model formalized an interpretation of the theory of John Maynard Keynes, C. Keynesian economics, and describes the economy as a balance between three commodities: money, consumption, and investment. He was co-recipient of the Nobel Prize in Economic Science with Kenneth Jones Arrow in 1972 for his pioneering contributions to general equilibrium theory and welfare theory. ISLM model. So, what is ISLM model? ISLM model stands investment, savings, and liquidity preference money supplies. The IS curves show potential points of equilibrium in the goods market. The curves represent all the combination of interest rates and level of income at which plain investment equals to plain saving. The LM curve show potential point of equilibrium in the money market. It indicates all combination of interest rate and level of income at which money supply equal to money demand. The equilibrium interest rate and level of income are determined where the IS and LM curve intersect. This is the only combination of interest and income where there is equilibrium in both the goods market and the money market. Hansen and others demonstrated that it is easy to add government spending and taxation to the ISLM model and use it to analyze the interest rate and income effect of alternative fiscal and monetary policies. The IS curve The IS curve represents all the combination of interest rates and level of income at which plain investment equal plain saving. It is derived from the investment demand function A, a 45-degree line, B, and the saving function, and C. To demonstrate the derivation of IS curve, we will begin with graph A in the figure and proceed clockwise to B and C then D. Graph A shows the investment demand curve for a hypothetical economy, indicating the inverse relationship between the interest rate and investment. Suppose that the interest rate is I, then as we see from the A1 on the curve, the level of investment will be I1. Graph B, the 45 line enables us to measure investment spending vertically as well as horizontally. By directing a line upward from A1 in graph A to point B1 on the 45 line in B, we transfer the L1 of investment from the horizontal text in graph A to the vertical axis in B. Graph C shows the Keynesian saving function. As income Y increase, the level of saving S rise by a fraction. This fraction is the slope of the saving function and is kin MPS. A potential level of equilibrium income will occur at C1 on the saving function because at this point L1 of investment is matched by an equal amount of saving S1 by dropping a vertical line downward from point C1 on the saving function to the horizontal axis of graph C, we discover that income is Y1. Extending the line further downward to graph D, we establish point D1. At an interest rate of I1, the level of income that is inconsistent with equilibrium in the goods market is Y1. The LM curve. The LM curve shows potential points of equilibrium in the money market. It indicates all combination of interest rates and level of income at which money supply and demand are equal. It is derived from the speculative demand for money, the money supply, and the transaction demand for money. The general technique for deriving the LM curve is similar to that for the IS curve. We begin with a graph A which relates the interest rate to the amount of money people desire to hold for speculative purpose. At low interest rate, people will hold large cash balance for speculative purpose and a few bonds, because the expected rise in the interest rate will cause the price of bond to fall. Such a rise would create a capital loss for those holding bonds. In graph B, show the total money supply. Increase in money supply would be shown as a parallel outward shift of the line. In equilibrium, the quantity of money supply must equal the amount of money demand. The demand for money consists of money desired for speculative purpose, which is in this case we have determined to be LS1, and the amount people desire to buy a good and service. By extending a line upward from A1 to B1, we observe that the amount of money need for a transaction purpose is LT1 minus LS1. This transaction balance will support national income of Y1 as shown by C1 in graph C. Next, we drop a line vertically from C1 and start a line horizontally from A1 to get point D1 in graph D. This point, as is true for all points on the LM curve, represent potential equilibrium between supply and demand in the money market. If the interest rate is 1, the level of national income required for equilibrium in the money market is Y1. The IS-LM equilibrium combine the IS and LM curve. The equilibrium interest rate and level of income are determined where the IS-LM curve intersects. This is the only combination of interest and income where there is equilibrium in both the good market and the money market.
Hi, my name is Hawan Atira and my matric number is 278548. I will continue the presentation. Paul A. Samuelson, 1915 until 2009. Paul A. Samuelson, born on 15 May 1915 in Gary, Indiana. He obtained a BA from the University of Chicago. Samuelson enrolled in the Harvard Graduate Program in Economics. He catch up in imitation of Keynesian Revolution, and Alvin Hansen was his professor. Decided yearly to apply mathematics to the body of economic theory from his doctoral dissertation, The Foundation of Economic Analysis, published as a book in 1947, and also used mathematics to set forth and prove the major proposition in economics. Samuelson teaches at Massachusetts Institute of Technology MIT and published many articles. At that time, MIT not excellent in economics, but Samuelson was confident to change that. He was not an empiricist. In fact, he labeled himself as interested in development of theory rather than do a trial of it. Then he was suitable to be placed in the subject of mathematical economics and welfare economics. His articles are enclosed diverse topics which are consumer behavior, linear programming, capital and growth, economic methodology, the history of economic theory, national income determination, and fiscal and monetary policy. Samuelson published many articles that numerous and highly mathematical in the most reputable economics journal. His economics textbook still used by all the students that taken college economics, even though it was no longer dominant at the same time. He known as a founder of modern economics and his textbook, namely Economics in 1984, and be the innovative work in basic of microeconomics and macroeconomics. Thus, Paul E. Samuelson was stated as the first American economist in 1970 to be awarded Nobel Prize. In 1939, Samuelson published two papers in which he identified and explored the interaction between the principles of multiplier and accelerator. This interaction has become one of the foundation of modern business cycle theory. Neither idea taken singularly was new. Kant developed the notion of the multiplier and Keynes used it as a central feature of his theory. John Maury Clark discussed the acceleration principle as early as 1970. He debated that fluctuations in the output and price of capital goods are much greater than those for the consumption goods they produce. Even if the demand for consumer goods continues to grow, a change in the rate of growth will be transmitted back with intensified force or acceleration to the capital goods sector. A cessation of growth in the demand for final goods thus leads to a sharp decline in the demand for capital goods. Interaction awareness by Alvin H. Hansen. Alvin H. Hansen suggested to Samuelson to use his mathematical skills to expand the ideas. Samuelson using the mathematical techniques by different equations. MPC size and accelerator coefficient determines a change of y. Determination of multiplier and later is the change in investment because of the change in rate of income growth. Depending on the multiplier and accelerator, investment and initial autonomous investment to produce priority outcomes and create no income to exist. Multiplier accelerator interaction. This interaction also illustrates the cyclical fluctuation in economic activity, which is investment to income. Increase in autonomous investment and income will increase through multiplier, which is change in autonomous investment will times with multiplier, which is 1/1 minus 2 MPC. Induced investment increasing through accelerator, which is V times change in income. And finally, there is an increment in aggregate demand and income with large amount. Income determination. The formula is y equal to c plus I plus t plus x minus m. From this income equation, we can derive to 5 functions. The first function is consumption function. The formula is c equal to a plus by. Then we add the tax function in consumption function, which is t equal to t null plus ty. And the final formula will be c equal to a plus by minus bt null minus bty. The second function is investment function with accelerator notion. The function is I equal to I null plus zy. The third function is government expenditure function. G equal to G null. Export function is x equal to x null. And the import function is m equal to m null equal to my. The income equation is y equal to 1/s plus bt plus m minus z times with a minus bt null plus I null plus g null plus x null minus m null. 1/s plus bt plus m minus z is the complex multiplier, while a minus bt null plus 1 plus I null plus g null plus x null minus m null is the autonomous spending. Indications. Y is the income equation. S equal to 1 minus b is the marginal propensity to save. Bt is the marginal propensity to consume times marginal propensity tax. M is the marginal propensity to import. And Z is the marginal propensity to invest. The national income will increase by the multiplier effect. So, the economic archetypally will be captured by pre-Keynesian theory of acceleration. Cyclical fluctuations will happen if there are capability of multiplier and acceleration. Complex multiplier. If the small s, t, m are higher, the multiplier will be smaller. And if small z and I null are higher, complex multiplier will be bigger. Phillips curve. This curve is by Samuelson and Solow 1960. This curve is the button of possibility between different degrees of unemployment and price stability, which is inflation. There are other contributions by Samuelson. Firstly is the efficient markets theory, which is complete market information. Secondly, the factor equalization theory that talk about product mobility. Third is comparative statics. This topic talk about the supply and demand do not have the tendency to move away. And then public expenditures theory, which is talk about consumption externalities. And the last one is the rival preferences theory, which is the consumer preference. That's all from me. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Lim and my fellow classmates. My name is Lushti Anapunpan Morgan. My tricks number 278307. So now I will explain the post-Keynesian economic school of thought. So first, we will look into the history of post-Keynesian economics. So post-Keynesian economics is a school of economic thought which builds upon John Maynard Keynes and Michael Kalakis' argument that the effective demand is the key determinant of economic performance. So PKE rejects the methodological individualism that underlies much of mainstream economics. Instead, PKE, which is post-Keynesian economics, argued that the fundamental uncertainty and social conflict required an analysis of human behavior based on social conventions and heuristics embedded in specific institutional contexts. So social interaction give rise in distinct systematic properties at the macroeconomic level. For example, if all the individuals attempts to increase their savings simultaneously, so total saving at the aggregate level may not increase because aggregate demand and output will decline. So this situation shows us the paradox of thrift. So the paradox of thrift is an economic theory that argues that the personal saving can be detrimental to overall economic growth. Not all scholars of Keynes accepted this neoclassical synthesis. Some denied both the ISLM interpretation of Keynes and standard microeconomics. Chief among these post-Keynesian critics was the group of economics at Cambridge, England, who are Piero Sraffa, Nicholas Calder, John Robinson, Luigi Pacinetti, John Galbraith, Sidney Weintraub, and many more other economists contributed to the school of thought in the United States. So now we will look into the foundation of post-Keynesian economics. The first one is fundamental uncertainty, social conflict, and effective demand. For the fundamental uncertainty, which that leads the economic system to an inefficient equilibrium of underemployment. Long-term expectations depend on both the forecasts about future events and on economic agents' confidence. The phrase "we simply don't know" is a statement about the world, not about human cognitive abilities. People can't be rational instead. Normally, people are rely on conventions, which they look what other people are doing. This scenario shows us that social norms and current situations assume that the future is similar to the past. Adaptive expectations, convention can change rapidly, hurt behavior. So money as means to deal with uncertainty, which is liquidity preference. This takes focuses on holding money as protection against uncertainty. Liquidity preference, money as a denominator of contracts and the use of money as a means of payment. So investment demand driven by animal spirit. As such, economic activity cannot be reduced to the outcome of some optimizing behavior, but instead depends upon expectation and sentiment, income distribution, and final conditions. The next one is social conflict. Social conflict, also known as distributional conflict, which struggle for agency or power in society. So social conflict occurs when two or more people oppose each other in interaction, and each exerts social power with reciprocity in an effort to achieve incompatible goals but prevent the other from attaining their own. In the PKE, post-Keynesian economics, there are offered three models. The first three classes of models: workers, capital, and rentiers. So rentiers, or also known as financial capital. Capital hires labor, firing threat as disciplinary advice. Capitalists make investment decisions, and rentiers advance capital and receive interest and also dividend payments. They have different consumption propensities. Institutions regulate the mediate conflict, inflation as the outcome of unresolved distribution conflict. So the third one is effective demand. Effective demand in Keynesian macroeconomic theory is the point of equilibrium where aggregate demand equals to aggregate supply. So in this situation, in the effective demand, investment is equals to saving through multiplier process. In contrast to the neoclassical mainstream approach, investment is not constrained by the availability of saving, but may be constrained by the availability of credit or finance. Investment expenditures are the single most important determinant of fluctuations in GDP. They have strong non-rational component. And also, private goods market equilibrium will generally not be at full employment equilibrium. So these are the foundation of PKE. Now we will look into the major tenets. There are total of 5 major tenets. So the first one is Neocardian view of production, value, and distribution, markup pricing, endogenous money, pronounced cyclical instability, and the last one is need for an incomes. So first we will look into the Neo-Ricardian view of production, value, and distribution. Piero Sraffa published Production of Commodities by Means of Commodities, a prelude to the Critique of Economics theory, which reconstructed Ricardo's production and value theory in a modern form in 1960. According to Sraffa, the pattern of demand for various products does not affect the pattern of prices. Rather, it will affect only the scale of output in each industry. The real values of goods depend on the shares of other commodities necessary to produce them. Relative value and profit are determined by the production techniques used to produce a composite standard commodity, which consists of basic commodities in the economy. So these basic commodities are goods that enter into the production of all other commodities. They are in essence capital goods that appear both as inputs and outputs. So the key feature of the composite standard commodity is that the change in either wages or profit affects the input exactly the same way that affects the output. So the next one continues. Sraffa's theory produced a novel conclusion, which is the level of domestic output is entirely independent of how it is distributed between wages and profit. Any distribution of wages and profit is consistent with a particular level of output. Robinson and other post-Keynesian expanded Sraffa's unconventional theme. So the actual distribution of income between wages and profits will depend on the class struggle, on public policies that alter the distribution, and on the rate of investment. So where the investment higher will increase the profit share. So Robinson argued that it is desirable and possible for society to control the distribution of income. This can be done through the socialization of investment, public ownership of the means of production, or incomes policy, which government policies to control wages and prices. Robinson believed these policies are firmly rooted in the proper interpretation of Keynes' the general theory. So, in respect with this, she called herself as a left-wing Keynesian. So next one is markup pricing. As we all know, oligopolistic firms set prices. So these companies fund their investment mostly with retained profit. Oligopolistic raise prices above existing cost in order to achieve their desired profit level and thereby actualize their investment plan. As a result, prices do not reflect current demand conditions. Rather, they will affect the cash requirement or fund requirement for the projected investment expenditure that the firm believes is required if it is to increase its capacity sufficiently to satisfy expected future demand. Firms raise their prices when costs rise in order to retain their markups over their cost. So the third one is endogenous money. In contrast to Fisher and Friedman, who regard post-Keynesian belief that the stock of money is largely endogenous to the economy, fluctuating in reaction to changes in the level of wages. The supply of money is determined by the needs of commerce. According to Keynes, money comes into being together with debt. Inflation results from a struggle over income distribution shares. So wage rises will raise the manufacturing cost, increasing business need for working capital to fund their more expensive goods in process and inventory. As a result, business borrowings rises and the money stock will rises. So the next one is pronounced cyclical instability. The economy is inherently unstable. So the investment must increase sufficiently to maintain consistent growth in national income and output. It frequently does not because of alternating climate of business optimism and pessimism. When investment falls below the level required to maintain a constant pace of growth, the economy will slow and unemployment rises. So the last one is need for an incomes policy. So an income policy limits the average annual wage increase to the nation's annual rate of productivity growth. So similarly, firms are constrained as to how much they can raise the prices. So successful income policy holds down inflation, minimizes the redistribution of income from inflation, and avoids the loss of output associated with anti-inflationary fiscal and monetary policies. So according to post-Keynesian, the class struggle for income shares and the markup pricing by oligopolistic necessitate a permanent incomes policy. So post-Keynesian perspective are likely to agree that inflation cannot be controlled through conventional instruments of fiscal and monetary policy. This is because they regard inflation as resulting not necessarily from excess demand or goods, but rather from a more fundamental conflict over the distribution of available income and output. So the conventional policy instrument, by curtailing the level of economic activity, simply will reduce the amount of income and output available for distribution, thereby heightening the social conflict underlying the inflationary process. So for the new Keynesian school of economic thought will explained by my groupmate. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Norfazila binti Jaidal with matrix number 27X00X. I will explain about the new Keynesians. So, the new Keynesians is a modern macroeconomic school of thinking that developed from classical Keynesian economics. Most modern Keynesians reject the neo-Ricardian value theory of the post-Keynesians. They also disagree with the post-Keynesians' demand for income policies because of the resource misallocations resulting from these policies. The new Keynesian theories have refocused attention on the traditional Keynesian question of why recessions occur. Based on the new Keynesians is that declines in aggregate demand produce declines in real output and increases the unemployment because the price level and nominal wages are inflexible downward. So here the importance of the downward price and wage stickiness is going to be demonstrated. First, let's assume that nominal wages and prices are completely flexible. Suppose that aggregate demand declines from 81 to 82 and aggregate supply remains at AS1. Then the P level also decline from P1 at point A to P2 at point B. Then the real output temporarily fall from its full employment level QF to Q1. This lower price level and greater unemployment will make producers to reduce their nominal wages. As nominal wages fall, AS will shift rightward from AS1 to AS2. So at point C, where AD2 intersect with AS2, real output returns to QF and the recession has automatically ended. This process simply actually describes the classical and the new classical viewpoint, where the economy is self-correcting, which makes government stabilization policies are unnecessary. But here is the new Keynesian viewpoint. When the prices and nominal wages are inflexible downward, it will be quite different. A decline from AD1 to AD2 will move the economy from A to D and real output fall from QF to Q2. Because wages are inflexible downward, the unemployment associated with real output Q2 will persist until aggregate demand returns to AD1. Active fiscal and monetary policy may be needed to affect this rightward shift of the AD curve. These are the new Keynesian economies. The economists have given these justifications for downward price and wage rigidity, which are menu costs, the formal and implicit contracts, efficiency wages, and the insider-outsider theory. The first justification is menu costs. So menu costs are the costs that a business faces when it decides to change its prices. Businesses in oligopolistic markets must be concerned that a unilateral reduction in price could trigger deeper price reductions by competitors. Thus, when aggregate demand in the economy declines, prices, at least for a time, may remain fixed while output falls. Next, the formal and implicit contracts. The new Keynesians point out that long-term contracts with nominal wage increases are frequently signed by unions. Union leaders often prefer layoffs for the select few, but during times of low product demand, businesses will keep their nominal wages the same, which to attract higher quality workers. Thus, if formal and implicit contracts are commonplace in the workplace, wage declines will not occur as aggregate demand declines. Next, the third justification is efficiency wages. So, efficiency wage is a wage that minimizes an employer's wage costs per actual unit of labor service employed, and it is above the market clearing wage. Because it is above the market clearing wage, the productivity of the worker increases as a result of the higher pay. Firms paying efficiency wages will be afraid to cut wage rates in response to declines in aggregate demand, because wage cuts will reduce productivity and efficiency wages may contribute to downward wage inflexibility and cyclical unemployment. So the last justification is the insider-outsider theory. Insiders are employed workers who possess some market power, while outsiders are unemployed people who are unwilling to offer lower wages than market rates in order to find work, because employers may view the cost of hiring them as being too high. When insiders are replaced by outsiders, the firms will suffer labor turnover costs. The output and profits of the companies will suffer if the higher paid insiders refuse to collaborate in team production with the new lower paid employees. Even if firms are willing to hire outsiders at less than the existing wage, these unemployed people may not want to offer their services at their best. It is because they will remain unemployed, waiting for an increase in aggregate demand to regain employment rather than undercutting existing wage scales. It will make that wages will be inflexible downward in the presence of less aggregate demand and cyclical unemployment.
Last, I will do conclusion and what we learned from this topic. Several influential economists like Alvin Hansen and Paul Samuelson were instrumental in bringing their version of Keynes economy into the mainstream of macroeconomic theory. Second, Hicks correctly noted that Keynes' liquidity preference schedule itself depends on the level of national income. He proposed a solution to resolve this intermediacy and develop a unified economic model with Alvin Hansen that synthesized the Keynesian and neoclassical perspective. Today, we refer to the Hicks-Hansen synthesis as the ISLM model. Third, Paul A. Samuelson identified and explored the interaction between the principle of multiplier and accelerator. He also identified the simple algebra of income distribution, the Phillips curve, and the contribution such as comparative analysis, reveal preference theory, efficient markets theory, factor price equalization theory, and the public expenditure theory. Fourth, economists from post-Keynesian, on the other hand, did not accept the neoclassical synthesis. They denied both the ISLM interpretation of Keynes and standard microeconomics. They proposed, among others, a new version of Ricardo's production and value theory and called for the implementation of income policy. Last but not least, the new Keynesian rejected the neo-Ricardian value theory of the post-Keynesian and they urged for income policies. Instead, they pursued a narrower line of inquiry by refocusing their attention on the traditional Keynesian question of why recession occurred. That's all from our group. Thank you.